I thought I was marrying the man I loved, but I became a prisoner in his own home. My name is Elena. I am 36 years old, and my husband's name is Daniel. He is 42. Before I got married, my life was simple, calm, and peaceful. I worked in a small accounting office in town, and even though my life was not exciting, it was mine. I had my own routine, my own small apartment, and my own quiet happiness. Then I met Daniel, and everything changed. We met at my friend Maya's birthday dinner. I almost did not go that night because I was tired from work, but Maya insisted, so I went. Daniel was sitting across from me, smiling warmly, and he started talking to me first because I was shy and quiet. He made me laugh when he joked about the waiter dropping a spoon, and by the end of the evening, I felt strangely comfortable around him. He was kind, attentive, and easy to talk to. After that night, he asked for my number, and we started texting every day. Soon, our conversations turned into coffee dates, dinners, long walks, and weekends spent together. Daniel made me feel safe. He remembered little things about me, like how I liked my tea with too much sugar and how I always cried during old romantic movies. After a few months, we became serious, and I truly believed I had found the right man. Daniel often talked about his family. He lived with his mother Margaret, his father Henry, and his younger sister Sophie in a large family house near the edge of the city. He always described them as close and traditional, and at first I thought that sounded nice. One Sunday afternoon, he took me there to meet them. I was nervous, so I wore a soft cream dress, fixed my hair carefully, and brought flowers and a box of chocolates because I wanted to make a good impression. But from the moment I entered the house, I felt something cold in the air. His mother looked me up and down before giving me a thin smile. His father shook my hand but barely spoke, and Sophie, his younger sister, hardly even looked at me. During dinner, his mother asked strange questions about whether I knew how to cook properly, and Sophie asked if I was used to big family responsibilities. I smiled through it all and told myself they were just reserved people. I did not want to see the truth too early. Daniel and I continued dating for over a year, and eventually, he proposed to me in a quiet park near the lake where we often walked together. It was evening, and the trees were moving gently in the wind when he knelt down and asked me to marry him. I said yes immediately, and for a few days, I felt like I was living inside a dream. But the happiness did not last long. When his family found out, they were clearly unhappy. His mother said, "Why so soon?" and Sophie laughed and said, "Marriage is not just romance. Some women are not ready for family life." I knew she was talking about me, but Daniel only told them to stop lightly and never truly defended me. I ignored the warning signs because I loved him and believed love would solve everything. Our wedding was small and simple. My family was happy. My cousin Naomi cried when she saw me in my dress, and my friends smiled and danced with me, but Daniel's family looked miserable. His mother wore dark gray, his sister came late and left early, and not one of them made me feel welcome. Still, I tried to focus on Daniel and our future. After the wedding, he told me it would be better if we lived in his family's house for a while to save money. I did not love the idea, but I trusted him, so I agreed. That decision changed my life in the worst way. Before we continue the story, download the PDF in the description and stay till the end. You'll find useful vocabulary examples and a fun quiz. In the beginning, I tried to be helpful. I woke up early every day, made breakfast, cleaned the kitchen, washed dishes, folded laundry, and tried to prove that I was respectful and hardworking. But instead of appreciation, I became their unpaid worker. Daniel's mother started giving me tasks every single day. Clean the floors, wash the curtains, polish the table, scrub the bathroom, dust the shelves, iron clothes, prepare lunch. At first, I thought maybe she simply needed help, but then I noticed she never asked Daniel to do anything and never expected Sophie to lift a finger. Sophie was nearly 30 and spent most of her time in her room watching shows or talking on the phone, but somehow I was expected to make her tea, iron her dresses, and even bring her snacks. She spoke to me like I was hired help, not family. Sometimes she did not even bother to say please. I kept waiting for Daniel to notice how unfair everything was, but he either did not see it or chose not to. That hurt me deeply. I worked all day at the office, then came home and worked for his family until late at night. My body was always tired. My hands became dry and rough from constant washing and cleaning. One cold evening, I made vegetable soup for dinner after a long day, and when I served it, his mother took one spoonful and said, "Too bland. You still don't know how to cook properly," then pushed the bowl away. Sophie laughed. Daniel said nothing. Another morning, I made pancakes for everyone, hoping maybe a nice breakfast would improve the mood in the house, but Margaret said they were too thick. Sophie said they were dry, and Daniel just kept eating silently. That silence hurt me more than the criticism. The pain was not always dramatic. Sometimes it came in small humiliations that slowly destroyed me. One day I spent hours cleaning the living room windows until they shined, only for Margaret to point to one tiny corner and say, "You missed that spot." Another time, Sophie looked at me while I was carrying laundry and laughed, saying, "Marriage has aged you, Elena. You look tired all the time." I forced a smile, but later, when I looked in the mirror, I almost cried because she was right. My face looked older, my eyes looked empty, and my smile was disappearing. I started losing myself in that house. I stopped calling friends. I stopped accepting invitations. I stopped dressing nicely. Even after work, I never rested because there was always more to do. I felt trapped, invisible, and alone. The only place where I found a little peace was a small public garden near the old library. Sometimes after work, I sat there for 15 minutes before going home, just breathing and enjoying the silence because nobody there demanded anything from me. One afternoon, while sitting on that bench, my cousin Naomi called me. She asked how married life was, and at first I lied and said everything was fine. But then I suddenly broke down and told her the truth. I told her about the chores, the insults, the way I was being treated, and the way Daniel never truly stood up for me. When I finished, Naomi said something that stayed in my heart forever. "You got married to be loved, not used." I could not stop thinking about those words. A few days later, everything finally exploded. It was a Saturday morning, and I had already made breakfast, washed dishes, cleaned the kitchen, and folded a pile of laundry when Margaret walked in holding one of Sophie's dresses. She handed it to me and said, "Wash this by hand." I looked at the dress, then at her, and something inside me finally snapped. My voice was quiet but firm when I said no. The whole room went silent. She stared at me in shock and asked, "What did you say?" I repeated myself. "No, I'm not washing it." Her face turned red immediately. She shouted, "This is my house. You do not say no to me in my house." Sophie appeared in the hallway, staring at us. My hands were shaking, but I stayed where I was and said, "I am your son's wife, not your maid." Just then, Daniel came downstairs and asked what was happening. His mother pointed at me angrily and said I had become disrespectful and lazy. I turned to him and said, "No, Daniel. I have become exhausted." He looked from me to his mother and back again, and in that moment, I realized something painful. He was still deciding who to protect. That was when I knew I could not stay there any longer. I went upstairs, packed a small bag with a few clothes, my toothbrush, and my phone charger, and told Daniel I was leaving for a few days. He called me dramatic, and that hurt more than I can explain. I looked at him and said, "If I stay here tonight, I will lose myself completely." He did not stop me. Naomi came to pick me up, and when I got into her car, I felt like I could breathe for the first time in months. Her apartment was small, warm, and peaceful. For 3 days, I rested. I slept deeply, drank tea in silence, watched television, and slowly began to feel human again. On the second night, Naomi sat beside me and said, "You have to decide whether you want to go back to that life or demand better." I knew she was right. So on the third day, I called Daniel and told him we needed to talk. He came the next afternoon, looking tired and ashamed. We sat across from each other in Naomi's kitchen, and I finally said the words that had been buried inside me for months. "Do you want a wife, or do you want someone to serve your family?" He looked down and said it was not like that, but I did not let him escape the truth this time. I told him everything, how lonely I felt, how exhausted I was, how humiliated I had been, and how deeply he had failed me by staying silent. I told him I had left my peace for him, adjusted my life for him, respected his family for him, and all I had received in return was pain and neglect. For once, he had no excuses. He just sat there quietly, then finally admitted, "You're right." I almost cried when I heard him say it because that was all I had wanted for so long, not perfection, just truth. I told him if he wanted this marriage to survive, I needed my own home, my own peace, and a husband who would stand beside me instead of hiding behind his mother. To my surprise, he listened. And this time, he acted. He began looking for apartments the very next day. He visited places after work, sent me photos, checked prices, and for the first time in a long time, I saw real effort from him. About a week later, he found a small apartment. It had 1 bedroom, a tiny kitchen, a narrow bathroom, and old beige walls, but the moment I walked inside, I felt hope. It was not fancy, but it felt like a place where I could breathe. We decided to take it. The day we moved out of his family's house was strangely quiet. Margaret stood by the doorway with her arms crossed. Sophie watched from the stairs. No one apologized. No one tried to stop us. No one said goodbye. And honestly, that told me everything I needed to know. Daniel carried the heavier boxes while I carried lighter bags, and when I stepped out of that house for the last time, I felt no sadness at all, only relief. Our first night in the new apartment was simple but beautiful. We had no dining table yet, so we sat on the floor and ate takeout from paper containers while surrounded by half-open boxes. The kitchen light flickered, the curtains were thin, and the room was almost empty, but it was peaceful. The next morning, I woke up and realized no one was shouting my name. No one was asking me for tea. No one was criticizing my breakfast. I stood in the kitchen making coffee and nearly cried from relief. Slowly, life became better. Daniel truly changed after we moved. He started helping with everything without being asked. He washed dishes, vacuumed, took out the trash, folded laundry, and even learned to cook a few simple meals. Sometimes his food was terrible, but I appreciated it because it came with effort, and effort is a form of love. We began talking more honestly. One night, he looked at me and said, "I failed you in that house." I stayed quiet, and then he added, "I thought staying silent would keep the peace, but now I understand silence can also be betrayal." That sentence stayed with me because it was true. Little by little, I found myself again. I started calling my friends. I wore my favorite dresses again. I bought a small plant for the window. I laughed more. I sang while cooking. I baked on Sundays. My cousin Naomi visited one afternoon, looked at me carefully, and smiled before saying, "There you are." I asked who, and she said, "The real Elena." Later that night, I stood in front of the mirror and realized she was right. My eyes had light in them again. My smile looked real. My face looked alive. 1 year later, on our first anniversary in the apartment, Daniel came home with a small chocolate cake and one candle. We opened the windows, played soft music, and danced barefoot in the living room. At one point, he looked at me and said, "You look happy again." And for the first time in a very long time, I answered honestly, "I am." Because happiness is not always a big house, expensive furniture, or a perfect life. Sometimes happiness is simply peace. Sometimes it is a locked door, a quiet kitchen, a husband who helps, and a home where your voice matters. I used to think marriage meant sacrifice, and maybe sometimes it does, but it should never mean losing yourself. It should never mean becoming invisible. It should never mean being used by people who call themselves family. Today, I am still Elena. I am still 36. I am still Daniel's wife. But now I am also myself again. I wake up in my own home. I drink my coffee in peace. I rest when I am tired. I speak when something hurts me. I live with dignity. And most importantly, I know my worth. I was never born to be someone's maid. In this section, I'll show you some important words from the story, their meanings, and a simple example to help you understand and use them. Peaceful. The word peaceful means calm, quiet, and free from stress or problems. For example, after moving to her new apartment, Elena finally felt peaceful. Attentive. The word attentive means paying close attention and showing care to someone. For example, Daniel was very attentive when he first met Elena. Reserved. The word reserved means quiet and not very open or friendly at first. For example, Daniel's family seemed cold and reserved when Elena met them. Appreciation. The word appreciation means showing thanks or respect for what someone does. For example, Elena worked hard every day, but she never received any appreciation. Criticism. The word criticism means negative comments about what someone does. For example, Margaret always had criticism for Elena's cooking and cleaning. Exhausted. The word exhausted means extremely tired in body or mind. For example, Elena felt exhausted after working all day and doing house chores all night. Humiliated. The word humiliated means feeling embarrassed or ashamed because someone treated you badly. For example, Elena felt humiliated when Sophie treated her like a servant. Neglected. The word neglected means ignored and not given the care or attention needed. For example, Elena felt neglected because Daniel never truly stood up for her. Dignity. The word dignity means self-respect and the feeling that you deserve to be treated well. For example, leaving that house helped Elena protect her dignity. Betrayal. The word betrayal means when someone you trust hurts you or lets you down. For example, Daniel's silence felt like betrayal because he never defended his wife. What does peaceful mean? A. Angry. B. Calm. C. Loud. D. Rude. The correct answer is B. Calm. What does attentive mean? A. Careless. B. Sleepy. C. Caring. D. Weak. The correct answer is C. Caring. What does reserved mean? A. Noisy. B. Quiet. C. Funny. D. Brave. Challenge yourself. Write your answer in the comments. Thank you for watching. Before you go, don't forget to subscribe to the channel, like this video, and turn on the notification bell so you never miss any new content.